because there's so many options out there, and it's exciting, but it can be overwhelming too. And so I think for different kids, there's going to be different criteria, or non-negotiables is what we talk about. And it changes really kid to kid. I think the first one is, how important is it to study a certain subject? Some kids really know that they want to study economics, and they only want to study economics, and they're tired of the other stuff. So you should find a system where you're allowed to kind of go this deep dive into economics. Other kids want to study economics, but they want to do it in a context with other stuff. So there's a system where you can do that. I have other kids, honestly, that don't really care what they study. They know they want to do something maybe economics based or math based or whatever, but they're more interested in maybe the name of the university or going to a certain country. And that's fine too. I have kids that say, I kind of want to study computer science, but I would be just as happy doing math. Or I think I want to study engineering, but I would be just as happy studying physics. And so, to them, they've got sort of a couple things that they would be willing to do. Some countries where you study two things. There's some countries where you study everything for the first couple of years, and then you study your major. So I think, trying to figure out which is a better fit. I think distance from home is something you really need to think about. You can get diversity staying in India. My kids are from Mumbai, but when they go to a university outside of Mumbai, they get to meet kids from all over India. And that's a kind of diversity. I mean, India is a giant country. There's so many different cultures. You don't have to leave India to get diversity. In India, university is quite affordable. It's not you don't have to change your lifestyle in order to afford most universities in India. You go outside of India, and some universities, the US is uber expensive. And it means that you might take out loans, or your family might have to, sell off some of their assets in order to afford that. So you're starting, your adult life with this kind of cloud hanging over you. If you can go to a system where they've got a lot of scholarships, or then that's fine. But you really do, I think, need to think of how much you're investing in this education, like lifestyle. Do you want to live in the city? Which I think, again, my kids are from Mumbai, so they're sort of used to having a lot of things going on. But there's something to be said about, going to the suburbs in a very peaceful setting where you can focus on being a student. Do you want to be at a really competitive school? Or do you want to be at a school that's more collaborative? If you go to the Netherlands, you get to ride a bicycle every day. So you have to think about what kind of lifestyle do you want? You can afford to get your dream. You can afford to be picky and have these criteria that are important to you. If you really like cricket, well, then go somewhere where you can play cricket. Why not? You don't have to sort of negotiate for those things. There's lots of options out there, which is exciting and overwhelming, I think, at the same time. We find that some of the kids who want to go to the more sort of traditional universities, they're making that decision in grade 8, right? Because they have to make sure, especially if they're going into the math and sciences, they have to make sure they have the right math or science in 9 and 10, and then 11 and 12. And I just can't even imagine making that decision at the age of 13. And some of them, I think, they're right in their thinking. But I think some of them just stick with it because they've made that decision, and they're just going to stick with it no matter what. I just find that my job, and I think more and more jobs as I'm talking to people, they are interdisciplinary. How often do I, have a conversation with somebody and they tell me that they do something that I don't even know what it is because it's so interdisciplinary. Very rarely do I talk to someone who's just a lawyer or a doctor. Lots of jobs, they're so complicated. The entire meeting I'm having with this person, I'm just trying to figure out what exactly they do because things are so interdisciplinary now. I also think that most people have multiple interests. And, if you can find a place where those things overlap, that's what makes you unique. That's what makes you employable. If you really like psychology, and you really like art, well, then why not do art therapy? That where those things interact, if you really like law, but you really like the environment, then become an environmental lawyer. I mean, I think that you know, we have this, the jobs now, they're so interesting. And I think that the more facets you can sort of prepare yourself for, the better. I think it's very exciting. I think it's helpful for kids, instead of kind of pigeonholing yourself into one place. I think it just makes you well-rounded. It's nice to be able to have conversations with lots of different people and read the newspaper and understand cover to cover what they're talking about. I mean, I just think there's lots of kind of exciting things about that. Liberal arts, I think, can be, it's nice because it lends itself to being adaptive. It's very flexible. And so I think that if you're somebody who really does like, math and science, you can do liberal arts with a math and science twist. If you really like the arts or the humanities, you can do liberal arts with that twist. I tell kids all the time, I was a history major. I knew I wanted to study history, but I didn't only want to study history. So in my liberal arts education, my university said you have to take an art class. So I could have taken sculpture, I could have taken theater, but I took art history because it helped with my history major. So there's ways to link it. It's not like you're just going to be taking random classes all over the place, although you can do that too. But I do think it's kind of nice to attack things from lots of different facets. I had to take an English class, so I took historical fiction. I took a math class that showed me how to plot data, historical data, to look for trends. I mean, I think it made me a better historian in that way. So, I mean, I do think that liberal arts it sort of lends itself to that. When I started, places like Ashoka and Flame were new, and it was quite difficult to get my families to even sort of apply because they were a little suspicious, I think, that they were going to invest 2 or 3 years and then this university was going to go belly up. That has changed. I have to say last year, and I'm not saying this just because I'm talking to you, but last year I had parents coming up to me and saying, well, what about CREA? What about Plaksha? What about, I mean, universities that I thought I was going to have to push because a few years ago I would have. I mean, the parents were right there. I think for me, because I know what it's like outside of India, there are so many options for kids. And because there's so many amazing students in India and there's not enough university seats, every university is competitive to get into. And if you can get outside of India, it's not like that. There's lots of options in the US. We have 4,000 universities. In Canada, there's 90. In the UK, right? I mean, you can apply to a Dutch university and you hear back in an hour and a half if you got in. And the kids are just floored because it's not this super competitive, stressful, anxiety inducing process. And so to me, every time we get another university in India, that means less stress for kids. And that's really what we should be doing. These kids should be excited about going to university. This is a huge option that they have. This is fun. This should be fun. And I just feel like until we get enough seats in India for qualified candidates, it's still going to be stressful for kids and for families. And so, yeah, every time I hear of another university opening up, I'm excited because I just think it means less stress for kids and their parents.